Welcome, everybody, to Strife's Sanctum podcast. My name is Citizen Strife, and for the first time in quite a while, I get to talk about anime. So, took a couple of weeks away from anime discussion stuff because I was building my voice booth, and I had a cold, and stuff kind of just didn't debut. And it took some time to kind of get the ball rolling on the season, and things are finally starting to kind of get dubbed or debut in dubbed form. So I had a few shows already, but then it kind of ballooned and ballooned and ballooned, and actually quite a few shows that I'm actually very interested in. This is one of the larger seasons that I think I've covered since doing this probably about a year and a half ago, and I think I'm up to like 12, like 11 or 12 shows, which, my norm is around 6 to 8. So that's a good sign for a lot of the quality that I'm seeing. So a lot of these discussions will kind of be brief because I got a lot of stuff to go through, but just the general vibe of things and like what the first few episodes have been, like which ones are my favorites, which ones are kind of in the lurch, and then of course the stuff that I dropped. So we'll get started. I have not gotten to Frieren yet because that's first show's going to debut on Friday. I'm recording this on a Wednesday, but it's good that they're finally getting to the season 2, and I get to watch it, and that'll be great, so I will have fun. But To Your Eternity, Season 3 has kept on going, and it's a continuation of Season 3, and most of the episodes of the continuation have been about Fushi kind of losing his grip on his friends and family, but slowly kind of coming to terms as well, understanding that parting is the way of life, just understanding that family and friends leave, and then they go back to dealing with Mizuha, and I think they're getting towards kind of the end game and finding Mizuha and just realizing that she's again just in a mess, in a complete, mental mess, having to kind of fight through that. And what are her motivations? What are the knockers' motivations? What are they trying to achieve? And then what's Fushi going to do with it once he does? So the effects of all of that. We have Trigun Stargaze. Only the first episode so far, but already a good sign because we've got Millie! Hooray! Millie is back. That was one of my main issues with Stampede was Roberto. He just was the old guy. He didn't really cut an interesting figure. He had some chemistry with Meryl, but not like Millie does. This is what I wanted the show to be. The 4 main characters doing their thing. Wolfwood will be back eventually. I think what I like is that Millie hasn't really changed much. I mean, they changed from insurance salesmen to journalists, but that's not it doesn't change their characters much. So even though this is kind of a reboot, remake kind of vibe, they haven't changed much as people. And thankfully, because I remember almost 30 years at this point, but Millie, voiced by Leah Sargent, it was fantastic. She was the goofball, but the heart of gold, giant lady with a stun gun. It was great. And, I hear Alexis Tipton's version, and, she has her moments. It's a little more subdued weirdness. But, again, I think that will balance out well with the fact that this show is a bit more serious right off the top. The biggest thing I've noticed about Trigun and the way they've done characters is they took one of the more forgettable villains, Zazie the Beast, and actually turned them into actually the main villain most of the time, or at least the one who's guiding people towards philosophical stuff. because that's usually what Legato would be doing. But they haven't introduced Legato yet, so it's like, all right, they've taken Zazie, turned them into a less of a one-note, one-off, 5-minute character into like, oh, this is a person we're following along with, and they have a lot to talk about, a lot to say, and there's a fucking ambulance coming by. God damn it. Of course. Can't stop an ambulance coming by, even with a booth. Anyway, but Trigun Stargaze, only an episode in here and there, but it's fine. I did like Stampede. Was it as effective as the original? I don't know. But once everybody kind of got in their places, there were things I liked about it, and I want to see more of it, and I think I will enjoy this. You know, just taking a different version of the events that I already know, provided they don't do what the live-action Cowboy Bebop did and just completely change it for the worse. But that's fine. Hell's Paradise Season 2. A lot of fight scenes. It was kind of rough going back to a show that's been like a couple of years removed. So I kind of forgot what they were doing. So they kind of just stuck me right in the middle of, oh, here's a fight scene between Gabimaru and this really angsty blonde dude. I forgot who they all were. And then, Sagiri, trying to get Gabimaru back into kind of the mental, because he was just kind of going apeshit and losing himself. And Sagiri is just like, no, you're not going to do this. You're not going to fuck this up. We're kind of in hell right now. Let's not fuck up. So Gabimaru's sort of back to normal, thank God. But the second episode at least kind of reaffirmed who everybody was and slowed things down after the battle, because that's what happens with shonen sometimes, is you don't get those slowdowns, especially when you start the first episode and it's basically just fight scene the entire fucking time. It was a bit like, oh, what are we fighting about? What am I doing? Okay, let's go. Sentenced to be a Hero. This is one of my two favorite shows. I'll get to my favorite one in a second. Sentenced to be a Hero is about, the best way I would describe it is Rising of a Shield Hero, but grittier and less stupid, I think, but still stupid. My problem with Shield Hero is it devolved into harem stuff very fucking quickly, and then didn't keep its momentum from the first few episodes, and then just was like, well, we'll go here and do a thing, and season 2 kind of fucked up, and then by season 3 I just gave up. I might come back, but I probably won't. Sentenced to be a Hero is like the same kind of setup of the dude basically being misrepresented of his crimes, even though he readily admits he caused a crime, but he was sentenced to be a hero. This undying isekai guy who loses parts of himself every time he returns and revives. So you don't like that. You have a version of him, of that sort of guy called Tatsuya, who doesn't speak. He's just a feral, I will kill shit, and I will eat, and I will kill shit, and I will eat. So the main dude is just like, I'm a little curmudgeonly. I've got these daggers that explode. It's cool, but I'm only doing this because I have to. But people are dumb and dying because demons are coming and infesting the world, so I gotta kill them, whether I like to or not. He's always at odds with the church, and he's always at odds with the knights, but he has this, gruff determination and says, all right, I'll do it because I don't really have a choice. But he's also kind of understanding that the world is shit, and if you don't treat it as such, just get the fuck out of my way. I got my job. I'll do my fucking job. So he doesn't just snap at people. He snaps at them if they're stupid. The main goddess, Teirita, is cool. She's voiced by Mama's voice actor, Sammy Lowe. First thing I noticed was yeah, she's in this. It's great. And her whole thing is she wants praise, and she wants head pats and praise. But she gets a Xylo she offers a pact with Xylo, and then he doesn't want it, but then begrudgingly agrees because she's awesome. And she just has these moments of being a teenager and just doing stupid things, but being excited about it. So you get that levity despite all this crazy death and blood and killing and junk that goes on in this show. It is very in love with fights. They love their fight scenes. The first episode alone is like an hour of just crazy fucking extreme fight scenes, which is pretty good. It's good quality fight scenes. But again, I would not like the show nearly half as much if Xylo and Teorito weren't, back and forth and kind of, their own way. But the Shield Hero explanation is not accurate, but is kind of still the closest thing that I would get to it, because Xylo does remind me at least of the early Naofumi, where it's like, he's just leave me to do my thing. I'm smart enough to survive and do the job because people are stupid and fucking this up. But at least he understands like the reality that he has to keep people alive because it's part of his mission. So it's like, you like him, and then he's a bit of a dick too. So it's like the anti-hero. It's great. My favorite show though is Shiboyugi, playing death games to put food on the table. Speaking of anti-heroes, we've got Yuki, voiced by Suzy Young, who is Yuffie, and Lolan, and Chitose from Yakuza. But Yuki is the main character in these kind of death game, puzzle game things. And it's kind of an online streamer TV show, Danganronpa-ish kind of thing. Like the way that like old school like the final Danganronpa was, it's like for an audience kind of thing. That it's basically Survivor in a sense, but in a weird snuff film kind of way. So it's kind of gross. But what sets this apart is it's very methodical and slow, but in a good, desperate sort of way. And like the first couple of episodes, it may not be for everybody because death games are usually like frantic and crazy and gotta show the blood and the gore. No, they don't. The way they get around this is to turn people into like powder and white dust and shit, or cotton or whatever, and they don't show blood. But I still distinctly remember like the failure state and somebody dying in the first episode, and it's just like just hearing their screams and wails and shit. So then Yuki goes into the second one, and then she finds this leader lady who thinks she's a leader, but then just rubs Yuki the wrong way, right? Just doesn't... They don't work well with each other. Yuki has knowledge, but people don't believe her. And what I also like is that Yuki isn't above just telling people off, or even just saying, if it's for the good of my salvation, or the good of the one of the many versus the one of the, the will of the many versus the will of the few. If it fits the game to get rid of somebody, she will. And one of her lines was, grieve after you survive. She even tells that to somebody who ends up dying later. So it's like, yeah. So she has no qualms about, if the situation calls for it, leaving people to die. So that's something that this character is just unique. And I've always loved shows where the main character grips you in a way that you'd never quite sure what her motivation is. But then it's kind of like the Xylo thing, where it's like, you're trying to survive. You have to do these sorts of things. So it's a very slow-going, methodical show, and it balances out Sentence quite well, because they're dark in different ways. Because Sentence to be a hero is a lot like Clevitas, but if Clevitas was actually good, right? The dark fantasy and, actually good at it with characters I liked, sort of thing. Let's see. Next up is You and I Are Polar Opposites. This was one I wasn't sure of in the first episode, and then by the second episode, I was all on fucking board. Suzuki is great. And I'm going to make this comparison of characters, and you're going to be like, how does that make any sense? How in this world would that make any sense? But the best way I would describe the main character, Suzuki, is she's a mixture of Haruko from Fooly Cooly and Mao Mao from Apothecary. Doesn't sound like that would make sense at all. But this show is just frantic, weird nonsense. And mostly because of Suzuki. Because she talks, she rambles, she screams, she squeals, she's gremlin-y, she squeeze, and then she has moments of just quiet contemplation. All in this weird package of this teenage girl who just owns and chews scenery like nobody's business. And the polar opposite part is like freaking... is like... Think of like Marin and Gojo from Dress Up Darling, but even more of a plank of wood. That's Tawny. But I'm just like... The first episode, I'm looking at Tawny and I'm thinking, God, this guy has like no charisma, no intrigue, nothing at all. But then, like, the longer it goes, and the more the episodes go by, because I'm up to like episode 4 by now, the more I appreciate the length of how much of a plank of wood he is, because he is at least trying to be like, yeah, I'm quiet, but I'm unsure of myself. And I'm unsure of, like, being around people, so that it balances out Suzuki, because she doesn't stop for 5 seconds. And it would be exhausting if this show was just Suzuki rambling forever. You do need that counterbalance, and I think that's what the show is going for, given that the polar opposites part. It is a good romance, and they do have good chemistry, because Suzuki does not have she doesn't have confidence. She is like bluster and weird hubris, and it makes no sense. And then when she just breaks down, you're just like, oh, she's actually like a real person, and it kind of just fits. So all of her weird comedic asides and voices and crazy stuff, and a lot of that does have to do with the voice acting. It's fantastic. But you realize that because she's so unsure of herself, and like most of her stuff is just for show, it makes her human, and it gives that crazy gremlin energy a place to jump off from. Because if it was just gremlin energy for gremlin energy's sake, it would get old. It would be the Don to Don thing, where I love the crazy, but just dial it back a little bit. So that's what this show does, and I'm loving it. Kaya-chan isn't scary. This one is dark in a goofy way. There was a show a couple of years ago. It was called Mie Ruko-chan, where this teenager saw like zombies. But the problem with that show is like she would just see zombies or ghosts, but they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't cause any problems. They would just exist, and she'd be scared of them. And it just felt like the show didn't do anything. This is what would happen if that show actually did something. Kaya-chan is this kindergartner who sees ghosts and beats up ghosts. She punches and she smacks ghosts. And it's one note, but it's a cool one note, because it's a setting you don't usually get. Kindergarten kids. You usually get teenagers or young adults. So seeing things from that perspective, and knowing that the main teacher, Miss Chie, is, she's not crazy, that Kaya is not crazy, she understands. And then there's a weirdo named Uncle Mobe who is also not crazy, but comes off as like the weird otaku person, But just because of how he looks, not because of that's who he is, but they call him out on it for being weird because he knows that Kaya saved her life, but doesn't really know how to express it. So there's a good mixture of characters in there. It does enough, and I think like some of the, because a lot of them are just small like half episodes or third long episode chapters, and they do stuff like here's this crazy doll who corrupts this girl and she gets like all ugly and disturbing and she loses teeth and she starts bleeding and it's like because I was putting it on like I call them junk food, where it's like the show is good enough but I know it's not great, where I'm kind of like on the fence. I call it the junk food scale. I was originally going to put this there, and then that scene showed up of the girl getting disfigured, and I'm like, fuck! This show has its moments where it will, because there isn't a lot of depth to it. And yet there is still, and I find it fun. Love Through a Prism, another romance show. And there are good romances all season. I'm very pleasantly surprised with the romance offerings. Love Through a Prism is this girl goes to London. This Japanese girl transfers to London in an art school, and she's tasked with becoming the first in the grade, right? But Lily keeps coming in second place because there's a guy, Kit, and he's just this weird, like, I'm good at everything, but I don't really care, and they kind of hit it off as this odd couple pairing, and they do shenanigans. And I think the nice thing is it is kind of set in Victorian London. You've got the Japanese aesthetic, but you also have the London aesthetic, and you have just a different vibe to some of the characters. Like one of her friends is like, "You're a samurai or a ninja." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm just a girl. I do things." But a lot of this is like art landscapes and cool visuals, and the art is fun to look at. And I'm operating under normal rules like I did with Leviathan, where the show is like fully binge worthy, but as 20 episodes, I want to just do like 2 a week to make it kind of the weekly to fit the same idea. I don't want to just binge watch it, and I think I'd enjoy it more because of that, because I don't want to binge watch this show. As good as it is, I think it fits better as a weekly. This one is another junk food. I like this one. I just watched the second episode. Finally, it took like a couple weeks off. An Adventurer's Daily Grind at age 29. I was a little worried that I would hate this, and then I realized it's got something. Again, it fits that junk food, kind of sloppy, kind of meh. It's kind of there, but it's still enjoyable kind of mode that I don't want to drop it. And it's about this guy, Hajime, who finds this girl, Riri, in just a forest somewhere, and they join a group, and he finds out that she's like part succubus, and she like has this weird thing where she grows up in the middle of the night and then goes back to being a kid in the morning. I don't fully understand like that idea yet, because I'm only 2 episodes in, but the one I just watched before recording this was adding Veronica, this succubus lady. And a lot of the goofy comedy, again, doesn't always land, but sometimes it gets a joke. One of the dudes is a chair, and he calls himself Swine, and he just goofs off because he's Veronica's chair. But I like that Veronica can basically bitch slap and punch things for herself, so she's not just a scheming succubus. So that's nice. I do like the Hajime dynamic, because again, this could be better, this could be worse, because there are shows, and I'll talk about the stuff I dropped, which there is dialogue here that actually feels like they're actually being characters instead of like being told stuff. and they don't even feel genuine. So there is this kind of like genuine warmth to the show, despite being kind of sloppish and slapdash, that again fits in that like 6 to 6.5. It works good, but there's better. But again, sometimes you like that as a pleasant, like, yeah, it's still good, because it's on the fence. Roll Over and Die, also kind of on the fence, but in a different way. Another show of twisted, weird, dark fantasy. Lady gets put into slavery, but then finds out that her weird power, because I was worried because this is another of the banished from the party trope. But then it does have weird, dark moments that I did enjoy. But I'm also aware that much like Adventurer, this is kind of in that sloppish, slapdash fence. But her gimmick is that she has reversal. So stuff that would be cursing people and killing people, well, she can equip it and basically become super powerful and shit. I don't know much more than that, except that it's dark as crap and is basically Clevetess. This is this season's version of Clevetess. My biggest issue with Clevetess I think it was like last season, where like I didn't care for the main dude, and the main female lead didn't give me enough to care about, and I think it was just trying to be dark for dark's sake rather than give me something to enjoy. I feel kind of the same way about this, but I want to give it another episode or two before I make up my mind, because again, I have so much good stuff. So having, Adventurer's Grind, which is pleasant and goes fast and is the dumb fun, versus this is super serious and evil and dark, but it's also kind of junk, I could do with or without it, so we'll see. The last show that I've seen so far, and this one's another good one, is In the Clear Moonlit Dusk. This is another romance, and another good romance. We've got like 3 good romances in one season. I like it. Yoi, this female who looks like a guy, but takes it as an insult whenever she's called that. She's basically fawned over as a prince because she's androgynous, and I honestly don't see it. I definitely tell she's a girl right off the bat, but some people don't, and it's like, she's just a short-haired, tall woman, and I think they explore the nature of being fawned over as a weird thing, and then being bullied at the same time, but then also having this very, very assertive but like calm demeanored secondary lead, this guy Kohaku, who really, 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 really wants her. But they explore and kind of explain like their faults and their misgivings about, things that could have been taken as jokes. And it's played very straight, very dramatic, and it's a good counter to the other show's very, very comedic stylings and very slice of life stylings. This is just a pure romance, but going into different places in a dramatic sense. So all of these shows, Polar Opposites, Love Through Prism, and then Moonlit Dusk, go in different directions so that they don't feel like the same. And a lot of romances, they have to have good characters, and I think this one does as well. Like, they're falling for each other, and they even express it. And the assertiveness of the main dude it comes off a little much, but at the same time you recognize why he would be so interested in this woman. So there's a good counterbalance without it coming off as creepy. So he even stands up for her against some bullies, because some bullies are just assholes, these bully girls. And I'm really, really liking this. I would put this up there with the sentenced to be a hero Shiboyugi. I think Shiboyugi is the best and my favorite so far. Sentenced to be a hero is second, and I think Moonlit Dusk is probably third. But there's a lot of good stuff, and Polar Opposites is like right there with them in a different way. It's a good season, and that's not even counting To Your Eternity, Hell's Paradise, and especially Frieren when it starts dubbing. Having like those tentpole sequel shows and all of this good stuff, it's fun. So that I'm okay with dumping a show here and there because I did. Let's see what I dumped. There was quite a few, actually. Some of them I dumped in seconds. I don't have much to talk about, but let's see. Hana-Kimi, basically the same character as Yoi from Moonlit Dusk, but played really dumb and boring. So I dumped it. It was reverse harem schlock. Jack of all trades, party of none. I talked about Roll Over and Die. And, banished from the party. It's another banished from the party thing. But the difference between that and this, Jack of all trades, is the dude talks at you. He doesn't, explain anything as a character. He's just, I'm gonna be an adventurer. I'm gonna have the skills of being an adventurer and make do of not being the fucking support dude and the whatever. And he's like, I could tell just from the dialogue. I had this problem with Water Magician last season where it felt like the show was talking at you rather than giving you a reason to think that this person was actually a character talking to himself or as himself. There is a distinct difference. So I just dumped the fucking thing. It was dumb. You can't be a rom-com with your childhood friends. I dumped in a minute because I saw fan service. And it was unearned fan service. I'm like, dude, I hated this when I was 20. I'm 40. I've been through this. I don't need to see this. So I dumped it. It was very stupid. A girl woke up in this guy's bed, and she had a panty shot. I'm not dealing with this shit. Dead Account. I wanted to like it, but something about it just didn't work. It was like Togen Anki, where I just the dialogue and the characters just I wanted to. It was about this rage bait dude who was trying to make money for his his dying sister, but it turns out she really did pass away, and then she's just a weird ghost thing in a social media account or something. It's weird. Like the dead accounts of things long past are turning into ghosts or living separate lives. There's something there, but it's also trying to be just a basic shonen show about a guy doing shonen stuff. I'm like, I don't need this. Misanthrope teacher teaches a class for demi-humans. I dumped this in 30 seconds. They had a sequence of this girl talking about how smooth another person's skin was. One of the main characters said, "Oh, look at her. She looks lovely, doesn't she, teacher?" I'm like, no, God, no. So no, I don't want teenagers talking about other teenagers having smooth skin and other weird, gross stuff. Just no. Villainess is adored by the prince of a neighboring kingdom. I just thought it was another Villainous show. It was quite boring. I gave it up in a minute. Tune into the Midnight Heart. Main character annoyed the fuck out of me, so I just said no. This is one I did want to stick with. Dark Moon, the Blood Altar. This is the last one. I kind of put it in the dump spot, in the junk food spot, before I did the other two, because I was liking it because the main character Suha was interesting, and even though the main boys didn't really have characters, they were all just kind of saying the same thing, like, "Oh, you're a good girl, and I like you, and you're fun," even though you know that the one main dude is the main dude. But after a couple other episodes, I was just kind of just trailing off and not really paying attention, and like the trashiness of it was kind of getting to me. So like I felt it was very low and basic, and I was on the fence, and I'm like, like if I'm gonna dump something, I'm gonna dump this. So I made it a few episodes, and I gave it like enough, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it enough to be like, all right, I've got 10 or 12 other things to watch. I don't need you. So that's what it felt like. I stuck with it longer than a lot of the other ones, for sure. But, you know, and other shows might join it. You know, Adventurers Grind at 29 and Roll Over and Die. Like, they're good enough. We'll see if they stick the landing. Other ones I know I'm going to stick with. And that you'd have to be really, really, really fucking bad at this point to dump like the top 4 or 5. So again, there was a lot of good stuff this season. And, you know, even if there was some that I wasn't as fond of, that's still a great hit rate, because I'm normally not this impressed by stuff in a season. Will any of it be like transcendent, amazing stuff that I'm gonna remember, like Frieren or Apothecary? No, probably not. But a lot of good, solid stuff that I like and I'm happy with. Let's see here, because I took that extra week off. It feels weird, kind of getting back into the swing of things. But here we go. I did the Bravely Default re-review, so let me knock that one off my list. But I got this episode. No, I said I was going to get rid of it. 1 second. Here we go. There we go. Dump you. Okay, because I posted that. Next week is No Sleep for Kaname Date, so I'm going to have to review that. I think my plan, I used to record these the day of the Saturday, like I would upload them, and then I started doing them the Friday night. I think now what my plan is to, when I find an open day in the week that I'm not at work and I'm not doing other things, I should just upload a podcast, so that I know I have it in the can, so that when Saturday rolls around, I can just boop. But yeah, No Sleep for Kaname Date is the next mainline one. There's Makia, When the Promised Flower Blooms, Final Fantasy VI, and there's Apothecary Diaries with Lee, and that'll be late in March, and we'll probably review that at some point. And then Ys Origin, which I'm in the process of completing, and I will complete definitely by the time this is done. But that's for late April, going into Mega May, because I'm going to keep going with that stuff. Mega May, Mega Man and Mega Man X specifically. But that'll do. This one's a little bit longer of an episode, I think, of my usual anime rundowns, because there's a lot of stuff to like, and I hope it sticks that way. So I will see you next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.